When the end is near, they show these 7 signs. I've lived many years, seen countless faces, and heard many stories. I've seen families grow, friends come and go, and life carry on in ways I never could have imagined when I was younger. But there's one truth I've come to know deep in my bones. Time doesn't wait for anyone. It marches on, sometimes gently, sometimes with force. And in all those years, I've learned that when the end is near, there are signs, subtle signs if you're paying attention, that signal the final chapter of a person's journey. I'm not here to scare you or to make you feel uncomfortable. I'm here to share what I've seen, what I've experienced, and what I've learned. When you're nearing the end, there's no need for fear or uncertainty. Instead, there's wisdom to be gained. There's peace in knowing that life is a beautiful cycle. And though the ending may seem sad, it's part of something far greater than we can fully comprehend. And I've come to realize that those last moments, the ones when time slows down and everything becomes clearer, hold something precious, something worth paying attention to. Over the years, I've watched as people near the end of their lives begin to show certain signs. They aren't always obvious at first, but if you know what to look for, you'll see them. And when you do, you'll understand that these signs are not to be feared, but to be embraced. They are signs of acceptance, of reconciliation, of peace. They show us that life is not a race, but a journey that leads us to something beyond. When the end is near, you'll see these signs, subtle shifts in energy, deep conversations about the beyond, the need for reconciliation, and so much more. It's not just about recognizing the signs in others, though. It's about understanding them for ourselves. We all know that time will catch up with us eventually. The key, my friends, is not to wait until the last minute to start paying attention. Life is happening now. And in these final moments when the end is near, we find ourselves ready to let go, to reflect, to forgive, and to embrace the peace that comes with the natural end of our journey. In the following words, I'll share with you the 7 signs that often come when the end is near. These aren't just observations from a distance. They are lessons learned from years of living and watching those around me live. They are gifts, if you know how to receive them. So, let's begin this journey together, with an open heart and mind, ready to learn, to reflect, and perhaps to find some peace in knowing that the end is not something to fear, but something to embrace with grace and understanding. Chapter 1. The Shift in Energy. As I've watched the years slip by, one thing has become painfully clear. Our energy changes as we get older. The lively spark of youth, the boundless energy that keeps us moving, eventually fades, leaving behind something quieter, more reflective. And when the end is near, that shift in energy becomes even more noticeable. It's as though the body, after carrying us through decades of work, joy, and struggle, simply starts to slow down. But it's not just the physical fatigue that you notice, it's the internal shift. I've seen it in the eyes of my friends and family. There comes a time when they no longer have the same drive to rush through their days. It's not that they're tired of life, but they are ready for the next step. There's a peaceful resignation, a sense that they've done what they needed to do, and now it's time to rest. It's not a sadness or an exhaustion. It's a quieting of the spirit, a drawing inward. And when you're around someone in this stage, you can feel it. I remember my grandmother in her final days. She had always been the one to keep the house bustling, to tell stories, to laugh loudly in the kitchen. But as her time grew shorter, I noticed that she spent more time sitting by the window, simply watching the world go by. Her body no longer had the energy to run after the grandchildren or organize the family gatherings. But her spirit? It was still there, calm, collected, and at peace. The energy that had once been expansive, that had touched everyone in her life, now had a different quality. It was softer, more internal. She wasn't sad. She was just preparing. Preparing for the final step in a journey she had already lived well. This shift is something you can't fake. You can't force it. It's the body and spirit recognizing that time is drawing to a close, and instead of fighting it, they find a quiet acceptance. If you're paying attention, you'll notice it in the way someone moves, or rather, in the way they don't. There's less hurry. There's more stillness, more moments of simply being present, of watching the world unfold instead of rushing through it. It's not a sign to fear, it's a sign of readiness. The body knows it's time to rest, and in that stillness, there is peace. Chapter 2. Conversations about the afterlife. One of the clearest signs I've seen when the end is near is the shift in the conversations that take place. People who have never spoken about the afterlife suddenly begin to talk about it. They become reflective, asking questions, seeking comfort in the possibility of something beyond this life. I've seen it countless times with elderly individuals, and I've experienced it myself. When time feels short, the questions about what lies ahead become more pressing. What happens after we leave? Is there something more? Is there a heaven? Are we truly remembered? I'll never forget one particular conversation with my old friend, William. We'd been through so much together. Long hours of work, raising families, celebrating birthdays, and grieving losses. But one afternoon, as we sat quietly in his living room, he turned to me and asked, "Do you think there's something more after this?" I was surprised. William had never been one to talk about religion or the afterlife. He was a practical man, someone who believed in the here and now. But in those last months of his life, he seemed to be searching for something deeper. He wanted to know if his life had meant something beyond the work he'd done or the family he'd raised. It wasn't about fear or uncertainty. It was about finding peace in the unknown. We spoke for hours that day. We discussed faith, belief, and the possibility of an afterlife. We shared stories of loved ones who had passed, and both of us found comfort in imagining them watching over us, still part of our lives, just in a different way. By the end of our conversation, William didn't have all the answers, but he had something more valuable: peace. Peace in knowing that there was a bigger picture, one that didn't end with death. He no longer feared what lay beyond. In the days that followed, I saw the same shift in many others. People who had never spoken about God, heaven, or life after death now began to open up. Some found comfort in their faith. Others found it in the memories of those who had gone before them. But the common thread was the need to discuss it. There's something about nearing the end of life that makes the questions about the afterlife unavoidable. And while no one can say for sure what lies beyond, these conversations provide something valuable: comfort, closure, and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. When the end is near, the desire to explore what comes after becomes stronger. It's a sign that the spirit is seeking reassurance, looking for peace in the face of the unknown. And perhaps in that search, they find the greatest comfort of all: the belief that we are not alone, that we are loved, and that the story doesn't end here. Chapter 3. A desire for reconciliation. There comes a time in life when the weight of old wounds, unresolved conflicts, and hurt feelings begins to feel unbearable. For many, especially when the end of life draws near, the desire for reconciliation becomes overwhelming. The things that once felt important, old grudges, misunderstandings, broken relationships, no longer seem worth holding on to. In their place is a longing for peace, for making amends, and for closing the chapters that were once left open and raw. I've seen it so many times. People who, in the hustle and bustle of life, had distanced themselves from family members or friends due to disagreements, now seeking to repair those broken bonds. I think that's one of the clearest signs of a soul who is ready to transition. When a person begins to acknowledge the relationships that need mending, it's as if their heart understands that nothing is more important than leaving this world in harmony with those they love. I'll never forget the day my brother-in-law, Jack, who had been estranged from his own brother for years, asked if he could reach out to him. Their falling out had been a small thing that spiraled into years of silence, pride, hurt, and stubbornness, all weaving together to create an insurmountable wall between them. But as Jack's health began to fail, something shifted in him. He was tired of the bitterness, tired of carrying that weight. His mind and heart longed for peace. I watched as he slowly picked up the phone, hands trembling, and called his brother. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with apologies, and apologies for apologies. But over time, they found their way back to one another. By the time Jack passed, he had reconciled with his brother, and that was a peace that neither of them could have gotten from anything else. Their bond, though it had been broken for so long, was healed in those final months. Reconciliation doesn't just happen between family members. It can also occur between individuals and themselves. Often, people who are nearing the end reflect on their own regrets, their mistakes, and their failures. And they begin to seek forgiveness, not just from others, but from themselves. I've seen people apologize for things they've done, things they've left undone, and I've watched them finally let go of the guilt that had weighed on them for decades. It's a beautiful thing to witness, this desire for reconciliation. And it's a powerful reminder that, in the end, what matters most is the love we shared, the bonds we formed, and the peace we created with others. These are the things we carry with us, and these are the things we leave behind. And Chapter 4. A focus on legacy and remembrance. As the end draws near, there's a profound shift in focus. No longer is the emphasis on acquiring more or achieving greater success. Instead, the focus turns to the things that truly matter, the legacy we leave behind. The desire to be remembered, to have our lives mean something, becomes all-consuming. It's not about the material possessions we've accumulated or the titles we've earned. It's about the love we gave, the lessons we taught, and the impact we had on the people around us. I've witnessed many elderly individuals, in their final months, take steps to ensure their legacy is preserved, not in the things they owned, but in the lives they touched. It might be as simple as writing letters to children or grandchildren, leaving behind words of wisdom, or telling stories that have shaped the family's history. Others may prepare something more tangible, maybe an old photo album, a collection of recipes, or a personal journal. These aren't just things. They are vessels of memory and connection. These are the things that help us live on after we've gone. One of the most touching experiences I had was with my friend, Eleanor. She had always been a quiet, introspective woman, and when her health began to decline, she spent more and more time organizing her home. But not in the way you might think. She wasn't cleaning out drawers or sorting through clothes. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table, writing letters, one after another, to her children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. She wrote about her life, about her childhood, the things she'd learned, the love she had for her family, and the lessons she hoped they would carry with them. Her letters were filled with wisdom, but they also spoke of love, the kind of love that survives beyond death. She gave each of her children a piece of herself, a part of her that they would hold on to long after she was gone. She knew, as we all come to know eventually, that the most important thing is not what we leave behind in terms of possessions, but what we leave behind in the hearts of those we love. I've seen others take this same approach in different ways. Some spend their last days telling stories to their grandchildren, recounting the adventures of their youth, the struggles they overcame, the joys they experienced. Others make sure to leave instructions, whether for a family heirloom or simply for how they want to be remembered. These are not grand gestures, but small, intimate acts that ensure their essence remains long after they've passed. When the end is near, the desire to be remembered is not about ego. It's about connection. It's about wanting to know that our lives mattered, that our love touched others, and that our wisdom was passed down. In these final days, we seek to ensure that the imprint we leave on this world is one of love, of kindness, and of grace. We want to know that we are more than just a moment in time. We are part of a story that continues to unfold, even after we've gone. Chapter 5. Physical Manifestations. Subtle signs of the body winding down. As time passes and the end draws nearer, the body inevitably begins to show signs of wear. It's something none of us can escape. But these physical signs are not just signs of decline, they are part of the natural rhythm of life. I've seen it in so many people. Each body has its own way of telling us when it's time to slow down, rest, and prepare for the inevitable. It's not always dramatic or sudden. Sometimes it's simply a quiet fading, like the final note of a beautiful song. There's a certain stillness that comes with the body winding down. People who have lived full, active lives begin to experience a gradual loss of energy. They may spend more time resting, feeling fatigued even after what would once have been a normal day's work. The body no longer has the same strength it once did. There's a weariness in their movements, a subtle heaviness to their steps. You can see it in the way they move, or the way they sit, the slowness of their actions, the absence of the energetic drive that once pushed them forward. But it's not just physical fatigue. There are other signs as well. Appetite begins to diminish. Food no longer holds the same appeal as it once did. Sometimes there's an aversion to eating altogether. The body simply doesn't require as much nourishment anymore. It's as though the spirit has already begun to detach, preparing to leave the vessel behind. I've seen many elderly people who, as their bodies begin to fail, stop eating the way they used to. They don't fuss about meals anymore. The rich, indulgent foods that once brought them joy now seem unnecessary. They may sip water here and there, but the hearty meals of their youth fade into something simpler, more minimal. This isn't a cause for alarm. Rather, it's a sign that the body knows its time is short. It's letting go, in the same way a leaf lets go of the branch when autumn arrives. Sleep patterns also change. The sleep becomes deeper, more restful, but often shorter in duration. People begin to sleep longer during the day, waking up at odd hours. There may be periods of deep sleep, almost like hibernation, followed by moments of wakefulness where they're still aware, but not quite present in the same way as before. In the final days, it's not uncommon for people to become weaker, to need assistance with walking, bathing, or even sitting up. It's a gentle reminder that the body is tired, that it has given all it can, and now it is preparing to rest, to finish its journey. For those who are observing, it's important to remember that these physical signs are not something to fear. They are part of the process. a natural conclusion to the long road we all travel. The body, though it may seem fragile, is also incredibly wise. It knows when it's time to rest, and in that rest, there's peace. Chapter 6. A deepening connection to faith and spirituality. One of the most profound changes I've witnessed in people as they approach the end of their lives is a deepening connection to faith, to the spiritual side of existence. It's as though the mind, after years of wandering, starts to settle into a quiet assurance that there is something more. I've seen many elderly individuals who, in their final days, turn toward God or the higher power they believe in with a peace that is unmistakable. They aren't scrambling for answers anymore. They've found them in the stillness of their hearts. And it's this stillness, this faith, that carries them through. I had a dear friend named Margaret, who had always been somewhat reserved about her faith. She went to church, yes, but her prayers were often quiet, private things. But as she neared the end, something changed in her. She became more vocal about her faith, more open in her belief that there was something beyond this life. I remember her telling me one evening, as she sat in her favorite chair by the window, "I'm not afraid. I know where I'm going." I've seen enough in my life to know that this isn't the end. She would talk more about her faith during our visits, about her belief in heaven, about how she felt the presence of loved ones who had passed before her. She began to share the comfort she found in prayer, in the words of the Bible, and in the quiet moments of reflection. Margaret wasn't just preparing to leave. She was embracing the idea of where she was going, with faith as her guide. I've seen this in many others as well. The elderly, as they approach the end, often begin to feel a renewed connection to their spirituality. They seek solace in their religious beliefs, in the rituals they've practiced throughout their lives, or in the comforting words of their sacred texts. There is a quiet acceptance that death is not the end, but rather a continuation of the journey in another form. It's as if, in their final days, they are reconnecting with the source of their strength, with the knowledge that they are not alone, that they are being guided, that there is love waiting for them. For some, this connection may come through prayer, long silent prayers in the stillness of the night. For others, it's through meditation or quiet reflection. I've known people who, in the final days of their lives, choose to visit the places that brought them peace. A church, a garden, a quiet spot by the lake where they can commune with the divine. They seek comfort in knowing that their life has had meaning and that they are not forgotten. In these moments, faith becomes not just a comfort, but a reassurance. It allows the soul to rest easy, knowing that what comes next is part of a greater plan. And for those of us watching, it's a reminder that our faith can carry us through the hardest of times, and that, when the end is near, the connection to something larger than ourselves brings a profound peace that can only come from knowing we are loved beyond measure. Chapter 7. A sudden peace and acceptance. As the end of life approaches, something extraordinary begins to happen within the heart and mind of a person. There is a moment, sometimes subtle and sometimes striking, when a deep sense of peace and acceptance washes over them. It's a calmness that transcends fear, anxiety, or sadness. It's as if, after all the years of living, struggling, hoping, and grieving, the soul finally lets go and finds a place of quiet contentment. I've seen it in countless people nearing the end, and I've experienced it myself in the quiet moments of reflection. It's the moment when the weight of the world seems to lift, when the constant worries and fears that once seemed so overwhelming no longer have the power to consume. The person begins to accept the inevitability of death, not with sorrow or resistance, but with a serene understanding that this is simply the next phase in the grand journey of life. I remember my Aunt Clara in her final days. For so many years she had been a fighter. She fought through illness, hardship, and loss, and she had always been the one to keep moving forward, no matter the challenges life threw her way. But as the days passed and her body weakened, something changed. She stopped fighting. Not in a defeated way, but in a peaceful way. She began to accept that her time was coming to an end, and she no longer seemed burdened by it. One afternoon, as I sat by her bedside, she turned to me and simply said, "I'm ready. I've lived a good life, and I know it's my time now." There was no fear in her voice, no sadness, only an overwhelming sense of peace. Her acceptance of the end was so profound, so complete, that it brought comfort not just to her, but to all of us who were gathered around her. We no longer felt the need to rush or to try to hold on longer than necessary. We understood that she had found her peace, and in that peace, we found ours. This sudden peace is one of the clearest signs that the end is near. It's not something that can be manufactured or forced. It comes naturally, as the soul reconciles with its journey and its purpose. There is a quiet surrender to the process of dying, a letting go of the fear and uncertainty that often accompany it. It's as if, in those final moments, the soul realizes that death is not an end, but a continuation of the journey, a peaceful transition to something greater. This peace can manifest in many ways. Some people express it through gentle smiles or quiet moments of reflection. Others may speak softly about their hopes for their loved ones, or share their gratitude for the life they've lived. But no matter the form it takes, the underlying message is the same. The person has come to terms with their life and their death. They have made peace with both. And that peace, I believe, is one of the greatest gifts we can receive at the end of our lives. It's the ultimate sign that the soul is ready, that it has lived fully and loved deeply, and that it is now at rest. When this peace settles in, you know that the journey is nearly complete, and the soul is ready to move on to whatever lies ahead. Conclusion: embracing the end with grace and understanding. In these final moments, we often find ourselves reflecting on the signs that mark the approach of the end. But in reality, the greatest gift of all is understanding that these signs are not to be feared, but to be embraced. They are not symptoms of sorrow, but rather signs of growth, acceptance, and peace. The journey toward the end of life is filled with wisdom. Wisdom in the stillness, in the quiet acceptance of the physical decline, in the deepening connection to faith, and in the overwhelming desire for reconciliation. As we approach the final chapter, we begin to see life through a clearer lens, understanding that the legacy we leave behind is not measured by material wealth or achievements, but by the love we've shared, the relationships we've nurtured, and the peace we've found. When the end is near, we are offered a chance to reflect, to reconcile, to embrace the wisdom of years lived, and to prepare our hearts and minds for the next stage. It is a time to release old burdens, to find peace with our past, and to focus on the love that will remain after we are gone. For those of us who are watching, these signs serve as reminders that life is fleeting, that time is precious, and that the most important thing we can do is love one another, seek peace, and find joy in the journey. The end of life may be inevitable, but it doesn't have to be feared. Instead, we can embrace it with the same grace, love, and understanding that we have shared throughout our lives. As we watch the final days unfold, let us remember the wisdom of those who have gone before us. Let us take comfort in knowing that the journey doesn't end with death, but continues in the hearts of those we leave behind. Let us embrace the end with peace, with gratitude, and with a heart full of love, knowing that in the end, we are all part of a beautiful, eternal cycle that transcends time and space.